Kalispera. Welcome, everybody. It's a great pleasure to have you today with us at the American College of Greece for an event dedicated to the role of diplomacy in economic development. We have 4 distinguished speakers, and we are going to have, I suppose, a lively discussion. The event is organized by the Institute of Hellenic Growth and Prosperity, together in collaboration with the Institute of Global Affairs. You know already about the Institute of Global Affairs, I suppose, but you may not know about the Institute for Hellenic Growth and Prosperity since it has been created lately, with the aim to support with research Greece's economic goals, the private sector, and reforms in the government sector that are needed to return to high rates of growth. Let me turn to and introduce our distinguished speakers. Our keynote speaker will be Deputy Minister Kostas Frangoyannis, responsible for economic diplomacy and openness at the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the panel includes Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Sweden to the Hellenic Republic, Charlotte Samelin, His Excellency Susuk Lim, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to the Hellenic Republic, and last not least, His Excellency Mark Allen, Ambassador of Canada to the Hellenic Republic. Without further ado, since the Minister has a commitment and has to leave around 5:30, let me give the floor to him. Minister Frangoyannis, looking forward to your statement.
Thank you so much. Your Excellencies, Madam Samelin, Mr. Allen, Mr. Lim, dear Mr. Psalidopoulos, dear parents, dear students. I'm honored to be part of this first of many, I hope, economic diplomacy event series, and thus I want to congratulate this historic Athenian school for introducing such a wonderful idea. I will start my intervention on economic diplomacy with the observation that both terms, economic and diplomacy, are Greek words. But contrary to what some people might think, the father of economic diplomacy was not some ancient Greek. As a matter of fact, it is modern Greece that engages in economic diplomacy in many ways, in an attempt to tackle the numerous complex challenges of today's world. So, my dear students and participants, if you wonder what economic diplomacy is all about, and since I don't have but a few minutes to talk to you, let me summarize the 4 pillars of what we do. First of all, we work hard at increasing foreign direct investments in our country. We do this by approaching top-notch corporations interested in investing here, and further attempt them through fast-track procedures, one-stop shops, and lucrative incentives. Secondly, we continuously exhibit openness in the competitive global scene, making good use of our extensive network of commercial attachés. We also have a dedicated agency, Enterprise Greece, involved in not only attracting investments, but also boosting our exports, something further supported by the government organization for export credit insurance. We have already planned some 60 different initiatives in the next few months to make Greece look outwardly in an unprecedented fashion. Thirdly, we do what I mentioned earlier by exercising skillful diplomacy of all kinds, not only bilaterally, but also multilaterally, by strengthening our presence in international organizations such as the World Trade Organization, OECD, NATO, and the EU. And then it's not only economic diplomacy, but diplomacy of every kind, be it religious, academic, or even culinary diplomacy that we partake in. Lastly, we embark on ambitious special projects. Just recently, we received tremendous publicity from Australia all the way to California and tens of other destinations for 𝙀𝙘𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤, the first green and sustainable island in the Mediterranean, a joint venture between Volkswagen and the Greek government. In addition, we made news with Nextigo, a manufacturer committed to produce electric vehicles in Greece, as well as other projects involving corporate giants like Microsoft and Pfizer and Cisco, etc. I was told that many of you study international relations, so I'm sure that you are quite familiar with the terms I used. However, I have to admit I don't know who the father of economic diplomacy might be in an academic context. However, for me, one man that comes to mind when I think of this issue is the following. His story is actually often taught in international relations. This man is Ferdinand De Lessep, a 19th century gentleman who was born in 1805 and during his life not only really worked as a diplomat, but also was a renowned entrepreneur. You see, he was both a man of commerce and a man of politics. He is most remembered in association with the construction of the Suez Canal. After its construction, a ship leaving Sweden and sailing to South Korea, for example, would travel more than 9,000 fewer kilometers. What made him succeed in realizing his dream was that he, in reality, epitomized all four pillars I mentioned previously. He persuaded France to invest in a project in another country and leveraged a good amount of money from other countries as well. After the opening of the Suez Canal, exports and trade in general increased tremendously. He made the most of all of his connections, like his cousin Eugenie, the wife of Napoleon III, and exercised sophisticated diplomacy on many levels to get the job done. And finally, the project he realized was a colossal, unprecedented achievement. To this day, the Suez Canal remains the longest 193 kilometers canal on this planet. I urge you to read up on him, but if we need to hold on to something from his story, it is his methodology. Lessep succeeded because he made it his business to show others how their interest, not his, would be successfully furthered. As Sir David Frost said, diplomacy is the art of letting somebody else have your way. Diplomacy is the art of compromise, and economic diplomacy is the art of compromise through economic means. Back to the 21st century now, I'm honored to be here tonight with three ambassadors from countries we have had and continue to enjoy excellent bilateral relations: Sweden, Canada, and the Republic of Korea. Allow me to refer to some specific points, as this will give you a better grasp of our work and how interesting it really is. Well, ladies first, so I will start with Sweden. Today, we look to Sweden to share know-how in many fields, especially the areas of high-tech and startups, green economy, climate change, and digitalization. Sweden has taken on an initiative by the name of Smart Industry, involving cloud computing, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So we have plenty to learn and share. On the other hand, Sweden looks to us for a large array of products. I understand that 50% of the food consumed in Sweden is imported anyhow, while the Swedes also seem to show particular preference to Greek fresh fruits, our world-famous feta cheese and Greek yogurt, but also organic olive oil, boutique wines, mastika, and of course, ouzo. Greece is also one of Sweden's favorite holiday destinations, although this is true for millions of our visitors from many countries around the world. Coming to Canada, I should start by saying that there are some 250,000 Canadians claiming Greek descent throughout the country, and many of them have made their mark in their new homeland. There are professors, athletes, journalists, politicians, and actors who are household names in Canada. CETA, the EU-Canada Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, is a prime example of how multilateral economic diplomacy can work. We also look to Canada to show us the way as far as renewable energy sources is concerned. Whereas if I did not mention the great investments Canada has made in Greece, with 𝘿𝙚𝙫𝙬𝙚 in 𝘿𝙚𝙤𝙤𝙤 and the Athens airport, I will not be a very good diplomat myself. Last but not least, let me talk about this faraway land, Korea, as it is a country of tremendous interest on a great variety of levels. Many decades ago, Greece, being a NATO member, sent a Greek expeditionary force in response to the United Nations appeal for assistance in the Korean War. Some 150 Greeks died at that moment. Veterans from that time, as well as their descendants, are remembered and honored annually by the Korean Embassy in Athens to this day. As far as our commercial ties with Korea is concerned, shipping, that Greek miracle economic sector, is the world. 25% of all orders for new ships put forth by Greek-owned shipping companies are placed in Korea, accounting for close to 320 million euros annually. Have I got your attention with all of the things I mentioned? Well, my hope is that you will become fascinated by the many topics you can explore just by choosing something I talked about and taking it further. You have seen that our work involves and demands a good deal of skills. Obviously, you need to speak foreign languages and feel comfortable anywhere in the world. You need to develop cultural awareness and be respectful of others, many times quite different than yourself. Your scope must be global, but local too sometimes. And then you need to work hard. This is not a 9-to-5 job. At the personal level, when I was about 22, like a lot of you are today, just about ready to start my working career and agonizing about my future, I asked one of my professors what I will need to do to succeed. He turned to a frame hanging on the wall and said, "There is your answer." What I read was written in Old English. "Everything cometh to him who waiteth, so long as he who waiteth worked like hell while he waiteth." And one last thing. As I said at the beginning of my speech, both the word economic and the word diplomacy derive from Greek. You may be tempted to think that diplomacy comes from two eyes, δύο μάτια, διπλωματία, thus two views. There could have been some substance to that, as being diplomatic does entail always looking at both sides. But the word diplomacy, just like the word diploma as a matter of fact, what students work towards all around the world actually comes from the Greek word fold, diplono. As diplomats of another time carried papers they either folded or rolled up so as to hide their content, thus diplomacy as a word was born. In closing, I wish that some of you at least will not only achieve the goal of obtaining a valuable diploma, but may also select the career of a diplomat. I can promise you that your life will be fulfilling and exciting, and you will serve a very noble profession, just like Ferdinand De Lessep did, and today he is mostly remembered for his great achievements that the whole world uses and enjoys. In that spirit, I urge you to work like hell. Be restless and dream high. Always dream high. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, very, very much for this excellent introduction that combined a historical perspective, but also everyday actual problems that economic diplomacy in Greece faces, and also to the reference to the three countries. Let me now turn to our panelists and ask if they would like to intervene, to comment, or make a remark in relation to what they heard from the minister.
Well, let me perhaps just thank the minister for recognizing all of us, and for embarking on some material that will certainly come out in our remarks as well. I think, speaking on my own behalf, I feel very, very lucky to be here in Greece, and during this very challenging time. And to know that economic diplomacy is going to be that much more important as the world recovers economically in the months and years ahead from what we're now facing. So I just wanted to acknowledge that current reality and thank you again for those fantastic keynote remarks.
Ambassador Samelin.
Thank you, Αξιότιμοι κύριοι Υπουργέ Φραγκογιάννης. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. You made my work very easy, and it was a very kind summary of the strengths of my country. Since we have all been tasked to prepare a small intervention, I thought I should focus on 3 aspects, and it will not be long, don't be afraid. But I am very happy also to address the students, and together with my very highly esteemed colleagues with whom I collaborate a lot. I thought to just say a couple of words about the fundament for the Swedish economic diplomacy. Secondly, a bit on domestic work. And thirdly, some examples of how we work in the field when we are abroad in the embassies. And the basics then on the first pillar of our work is what we have in Sweden is called export strategy. Now, this export strategy is very much also about imports and investments, both coming inwards and going out. We are also, of course, within this export strategy, highlighting how we should promote our country. And then we focus on culture and values and strengths of our economy. And lastly, within this segment, also the EU is crucial. We must deepen the internal market and the digital single market in Europe because, let's face it, Greece and Sweden, a country with 10 million inhabitants, we are nowhere on the global market if we cannot have access to a European market who functions well and with no regulatory burdens. And in this sense, we also work very much together with the European Commission within the World Trade Organization, because we must all fight for keeping the multilateral trade system up and running, functioning and being open so that we can all profit from it. Secondly, when it comes to domestic work, of course, the foreign ministry is important, and it's a part of our training, becoming a diplomat, to learn how to do economic diplomacy. But we would be nowhere if we didn't have 2 organizations. The first organization is Business Sweden, and Business Sweden has about 550 employees in 4 countries globally. And they also have regional offices in Sweden because their work is also to facilitate inward investments as much as they are tailor-making advice for multinational companies, for SMEs and startups, how to access other markets. And secondly, we have our National Board of Trade. And this is our oldest agency, in fact. It was founded in 1651 by Queen Christina. And nowadays, the National Board has 90 employees, and they are equally important in reaching out to companies in Sweden who are looking for opportunities abroad, so that they take advantage of the multilateral trade system and the bilateral EU trade agreements. And then if I may turn lastly, the hands-on, how we work here in the embassies. Firstly, we work a lot on our image. We work on promoting Sweden, the values. We want to create a narrative. We work very much with the gender equality, all our efforts in sustainable development and digitalization. And we try to highlight the excellence in research and development and engineering. That's one thing on the image side. Then secondly, we work on identifying trade restrictions or regulations inhibiting Swedish businesses to establish here or to export. And I can give you one example. In fact, I have two examples now also relevant during the pandemic. The first one is that we have a company producing sanitary equipment for, amongst other, the medical sector. Now, the Greek Ministry for Health took a decision to recategorize their products. And now they are in a disadvantaged position in relation to other companies exporting similar equipment to Greece. And so I'm trying to reach out to the Ministry of Health to ask them about this recategorization, because it is unfortunately costing this company a lot.
Ambassador Samelin.
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you at this very interesting juncture of your intervention, but as I said in the beginning, the minister has to depart.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry.
with your permission, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Lin for a
Yes.
short intervention. Then we ask the minister to respond. And then, of course, you will have plenty of time to explain all these very interesting things you have been telling us once more for our students and participants. Ambassador Lin.
Yes, Deputy Minister, thank you for your very comprehensive comments. And you have touched many important pillars of the new government's economic diplomacy. Personally, because of Deputy Minister's enormous efforts, I have witnessed so many changes in the Greek government. Whenever I contact high-level officials, there are quick response, and action is very speedy. So I hope that there will be a brighter future. And as Prime Minister Mitsotakis said, Greece will make a success story in Europe. And I believe that Korea can be a true partner to Greece on this wonderful journey. And as you mentioned, the shipping and shipbuilding industry, we are very strong partners in our key industries. And I hope that we will continue to our strong friendship and partnership, celebrating the 60 years of our partnership, as the logo says behind me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Lin. Minister Fragogiannis, a quick response.
I just wish to tell you that I'm very honored to be here with you today in the presence of true friends. I personally know Her Excellency Charlotte Samelin, the Ambassador of Canada, Mike Allen, and the Ambassador of Korea, Mr. Lin. It is always a joy to be with them, and it is always a joy to celebrate the excellent bilateral relationship between Greece and the aforementioned countries. Honored to be with you, gentlemen and Madam Samelin, and it has been a particular pleasure to be in this event organized by this historic Athenian school. It does bring memories of the past, and it is lovely to be here with you today. I wish you the very, very best. I wish I could stay, but the truth of the matter is that I have to attend a meeting at the Prime Minister's office, and I cannot say no. So I have to go. Pleasure to be, honored to be here with you. Best of luck and good success in this event of yours today.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much indeed. So let me, with expressing my apologies once more, let me again turn to Ambassador Samelin. Apologies for the interruption, but everyone has been following her story about Sweden and its economic diplomacy very closely. Please feel free to continue or recap and continue as you please. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I thought we were supposed to start immediately with our intervention. Well, I would like to finalize then, because as I was explaining about the categorization of products, that was one thing. And then another example where many people in the ministry were involved in the beginning of the pandemic is a company producing also equipment for the medical sector, who has production and then a basis in France, in fact. And this company takes all the imports from globally into France, and then from there on they distribute it within the whole European Union. And in the beginning of the pandemic, the French government took a decision to prohibit the export, sending out all the equipment and the production of this company to other member states. And that required quite a lot of work from headquarters in Stockholm, but also the embassy in France, in order to free these products for exports to the rest of the European Union. And as a last example, I would like to also mention that we work a lot on following public procurement and the government tenders for all the sectors where we are strong and where we can compete. Examples that I have are from the energy sector. Also, we have many companies who are specialized in certain construction of airports, but in certain segments of the airport. And then, of course, we have Ericsson, who together with Cosmote is working very hard to secure a big share of the 5G in Greece. And here we work, of course, we try to find out about public procurement when the tenders are being published, and we also try to work on governments if there are any unclarities to understand the tenders in order to secure a level playing field for all companies participating. And as a last remark, I would like to especially mention the excellent cooperation we have in what we call Team Sweden. And Team Sweden is comprised of the Hellenic Swedish Chamber of Commerce in Greece. It's the 6th biggest bilateral chamber in Greece, and with Business Sweden. Now, we don't have a Business Sweden office in Athens. We used to have that, but during the economic crisis, since then we are now covered by the office in Milano, but it works very well. And it is within this Team Sweden that we managed to actually have a very good basis for our economic diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was extremely interesting. I'm sure our students and all the other participants have appreciated this glimpse you gave us to Sweden and its action on the field of economic diplomacy greatly. Let me turn now to Ambassador Lim and ask him what Korea has to teach us about economic diplomacy.
Thank you, moderator. It is my great pleasure to speak at this seminar today. I'd like to share with you my perspective on Korea's economic development and the types of cooperation between Greece and Korea. Korea is an economic growth success story. In 1967, the year I was born, Korea was one of the poorest countries. Its per capita GDP was only $150, ranking 93rd in the world. We survived the Korean War, but had to start from the ashes. And take this opportunity, I'd like to extend my special thanks to Greece, Sweden, and Canada, along with other partners that had sent troops or medical team to defend Korea's freedom and democracy 70 years ago. Korea joined OECD, a rich countries club, only in 1996. Greece, Sweden, Canada were the founding members of this club, which was created in 1961. So one might say that Korea was 3 decades behind. But within one generation, Korea has transformed itself from aid recipient to a donor country. and Korea is the only country to have achieved this. Korea's diplomacy has a very positive impact on economic development. Until 1970s, one of its priorities was to obtain an foreign investment. During that time, Korea started heavy chemical industry and continued its export-oriented policy. With a lack of natural resources and small domestic market, Korea relied heavily on trade for its survival. Since the 1980s, Korea has focused on facilitating free trade as well as regional and international cooperation. For instance, Australia and Korea played an important role in creating APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, the largest regional economic body. In 2019, the APEC members account for 76% of Korea's export and 60% of foreign direct investment in Korea. Korea is also the only country to have hosted Korea-ASEAN Special Summit 3 times. Now, ASEAN is Korea's second biggest partner for trade and investment. More than 15,000 Korean companies are operating in Asian market. Free trade agreements has emerged as a new engine for Korean economic growth. Until 2002, Korea and Mongolia were the only 2 WTO member states that had not signed any single FTA. Korea was a latecomer in the FTA race, but Korea became a key player in the game with its ambitious multi-track FTA policy. Now, Korea's economic territory covers around 80% of the world GDP. Korea is also the first country in the world to have signed 3 key agreements with the European Union: the FTA, Framework Agreement, and the Crisis Management Agreement. One of the keys to Korea's miracle was the close collaboration among business, people, and government. One might say the business is like the engine of a car. Government builds highways and bridges for cars, and hardworking people make use of this to move ahead very quickly. It is like a 3-legged race. Korea is redoubling its effort for new engines for growth: 6G, biotechnology, AI, creative industry, and so on. We want to share with our partners the story of hope. Korea made it. Greece and our friends can do it better. Now I'd like to turn to the relations between Greece and Korea. This year, our 2 countries are celebrating the 60th years of partnership, as the logo said behind me. Though we are far away from each other geographically, we have so many common elements between us. We are both on the same 38th parallel. We are peninsular and maritime countries. We have taken a very similar path in our modern history: colonial rule, independence, civil war, military dictatorship, and democracy. Greek ship owners assisted Korea in embarking on its shipbuilding industry since the 1970s. In return, Korea had also helped Greece keep its #1 position in shipping industry by providing ships on time and within budget. In fact, Korea has built a great number of ships for Greece: big ships, LNG ships, smart ships, but our best ship is friendship. Based on a long history of mutual trust, our 2 countries are front runners in the shipping and shipbuilding industry. We also maintain close cooperation in the IT industry. A Korean company has been working closely with its Greek counterpart in an e-ticketing project with its own public transport. Before the end of this year, we can make Athens the second city in Europe where people can use their credit card on public transport. The ports of Piraeus and Thessaloniki use a Korean program to handle containers. With this program, Piraeus can handle 5 million containers a year. There is also great scope to work closely with each other in areas of digital economy, smart cities, science and innovation. Prime Minister Mitsotakis has said that Greece will make a success story in Europe, and I believe that Korea will be a true partner to Greece on this wonderful journey. The ability of our young generations give me great hope for a brighter future. Before closing, I'd like to quote the moving words of a Greek veteran of the Korean War. He said, "Korea is my second home country, and I'm so proud of the Korea of today. 7 decades ago, we planted a small tree of friendship. Now, it is a task for the young generations to help it to flourish." Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Ambassador Lin. We will have, I guess, a thorough discussion later when the participants are going to ask questions. Thank you very much. Let me now turn to our last speaker for today, Ambassador Mark Allen. Ambassador Allen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the American College for this opportunity, and the minister and my esteemed colleagues for their participation in this really interesting discussion. Economic diplomacy, as it's been defined by the minister, I think, and my colleagues, complements traditional diplomacy. And it takes broadly, I think, two forms, bilateral and multilateral. Sometimes those forms overlap. And we as diplomats are specialists in one or the other at various times in our career. Obviously, the three of us now are engaged in bilateral diplomacy with Greece. So let me talk about the relationship that I obviously know best, which is the Canada-Greece relationship. And I have to underscore that economic issues are really at the heart of that relationship. Political relations, of course, are important. Our joint membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, our common approach to democracy and human rights. Cultural relations and people-to-people ties are also extremely important, and the minister mentioned the vibrant Greek diaspora that has a home in Canada. But when our prime ministers and our ministers speak, most of the time, I have to say, is taken up with commercial and economic issues. And that's because our two countries share a common agenda for prosperity and economic growth. So what do Canadian diplomats do to further the agenda of economic growth? Well, we are one of the pioneers of economic diplomacy in the form of a trade commissioner service that was stood up in the 19th century. We're a young country, but our roots in this field run deep. And as early as 1895, Canada sent its first trade commissioner to Australia. And today we have 1,000 trade commissioners who are effectively commercial and economic diplomats in 160 embassies and missions around the world, supporting Canadian companies by opening doors to export, investment, and innovation. They work to promote opportunities, which are win-win with buyers and sellers around the world, with investors and recipients of investment. Secondly, and as has been mentioned, trade agreements are extremely important to economic diplomacy and to incentivizing international trade and therefore prosperity. They reduce barriers. They cut costs, which lowers consumer prices and effectively makes production more efficient and competitive among countries which have entered into trade agreements. I'm proud to say that Canada has 14 free trade agreements. We're the only country in the G7 that has a free trade agreement in place with every other country in the G7. We cover 60% of world GDP, access to 1.5 billion consumers in 51 countries. Among the most progressive of this series of agreements is the one mentioned by Minister Ďă̌răș, which is the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between Canada and the European Union, which from our perspective is a bilateral agreement with a multilateral organization. And it's been provisionally applied since 2017. Greece obviously is one of the member states of the European Union with whom the agreement is in place. So it serves as the framework for Canada-Greece trade and Canada-Greece commercial and economic relations. Greece benefits enormously from this agreement. 419 million euros of exports in goods and services to Canada every year. And the balance of trade is by far in Greece's favor, 287 million euros. 700 Greek companies export to Canada. 80% of those are small and medium-sized enterprises. And so the agreement is responsible for no less than 3,500 Greek jobs. So what does this agreement do? It scraps tariffs and creates opportunities, including in the field of agriculture, where Greece has tremendous strengths and in other markets. It allows Greek firms to bid on public contracts in Canada and vice versa, including in the lucrative marine transport sector, where Greece has real strengths. It allows the mobility of professionals between Canada and Greece, including lawyers, accountants, architects, and engineers. It will, when it's fully ratified, provide investment guarantees, including non-discrimination. You've heard the minister on the importance that we know Greece attaches to attracting and retaining foreign direct investment. And he noted that Canada is among the top investors. I believe we're among the top 5 investors and the largest non-European investor. And so I think it's important to underscore the role of guarantees in attracting foreign investment, and the role of cutting red tape and bureaucracy. Which CETA also does through mutual recognition standards. My Swedish colleague alluded to the red tape that can continue to exist even within a trading bloc, and we recognize that it does also between trading partners at times. To give you a very contemporary example, there were concerns earlier this week around vaccine procurement. And Canadian ambassadors in all European countries were sent to talk to capitals to obtain assurances around vaccine supply, which is a trade issue. It's also a health issue and a very current one. We've seen the new transparency and authorization mechanism in the begin to work with the first exports to the UK and Canada, which is very reassuring. But again, I think it speaks to the role of diplomats in continuing to keep doors and supply chains open. So let me now turn briefly to the world of multilateral diplomacy, which my colleagues have also referred to. I think most people in the audience will be obviously familiar with the European Union and the United Nations and NATO, which I mentioned. And I want to take the opportunity to talk about four international organizations that have an economic mandate. My Korean colleague mentioned the OECD, as well as APEC, of which Canada is a member. I want to add two to that list, the G7 and the G20. I think the OECD is incredibly important, and it's important because it's a venue for policy dialogue and research. It's often cited as being the world's database. And it's an organization of economically developed countries that come together to engage in that policy dialogue and exchange ideas about approaches to economic development and social well-being. Canada's priorities in the organization are to promote economic recovery that works for everyone, to promote green and resilient economies, digitalization, and gender equality. It's an organization that I think has some profile at the moment in Greece, because Greece is fielding a candidate to lead that organization, who's one of two remaining women. The other is the Swedish candidate. Canada participated, a Canadian candidate rather, participated in earlier rounds and unfortunately had to withdraw. And we wish the remaining candidates well. We competed because of the importance of the organization. And it was great to see a field of very strong candidates vying to lead it. APEC, which is based in Singapore and was founded in 1989, is similar in the sense that it's also a place where, in this case, 27 economies of Asia and the Pacific, including the countries of North, South, and Central America that border the Pacific, come together to share best practices and to incubate really innovative ideas, given the dynamism of many of these economies. So they come together to talk about supply chains and customs procedures, economic empowerment of different groups in society. Even mental health and health ethics are discussed in this forum, which is also, I should mention, principally consensus-based. The G7, the group of 7 industrialized economies, as it's often referred to, was founded in 1975. It's actually got 8 members because the European Union and the European institutions participate regularly in the summits and dialogue. As I say, it was founded as the world's leading economies. But now there's also an attachment among those economies to the importance of democracy and human rights. And because these are the leading economies, including the European Union, there's the opportunity to discuss at a very strategic level global trends and pervasive cross-cutting issues that affect everyone. There's no secretariat, but there is a rotating presidency. It's currently the UK. And the president has the opportunity to sort of set the agenda for the year and prioritize the issues. When Canada's held the presidency, we've prioritized cybersecurity, the blue economy, which is also very important for Greece, and the education of women and girls. Stemming out of the G7 is a more recent creation, the G20, which came into existence, including at the initiative of the Canadian Prime Minister at the time, Paul Martin, in 1999. And I think it recognized that globalization was underway. More than 7 or 8 economies needed to be included in this dialogue, including emerging economies from all continents. It's a leader level organization and focuses on many of those topics that I've outlined, but including infrastructure, climate action, and the very interesting and essential topic of jobs for the future, because the workforce is changing rapidly with the advance of technology. Canada co-chairs the G20 Framework Working Group, which assesses the macroeconomic impact of technological change on productivity, growth, employment, and inequality. So in summing up, I think that economic diplomacy complements traditional diplomacy. It works on a variety of levels, from making deals to finding solutions to global challenges. The focus is on economic prosperity and on win-win outcomes for the countries involved. I think if the minister identified diplomacy as coming at issues from at least two different views, I think economic diplomacy is ensuring that those two different views ensure win-win outcomes for the parties involved. So thanks again for the opportunity to address you, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Allen. Very interesting. And let me ask those who watch to send their questions. Some of them already have, but of course, you have been all very comprehensive, and your approach has been most helpful, especially for students. And I guess, however, I guess that some questions are out there. Until some questions come, allow me to ask you, misuse my position and ask you a couple of things. Ambassador Samelin referred to the cooperation between a Greek company, Cosmote, with a Swedish one, Ericsson, and a question that springs up is, what do diplomats have actually to do with two private companies interacting, agreeing, and moving forward in their plans? Actually, one might argue that what the diplomat does has to do with foreign policy. Is economic policy part and parcel of what a diplomat does nowadays? And if I may ask, how much of your time do economic issues take? 20%, more, 50% perhaps? If you would like to react to that.
Well, first, if economic diplomacy is part of a diplomat's work, in our system it is. You are being evaluated on the basis on your performance in economic diplomacy. So if you don't master this, your chances of a career in the foreign ministry is quite limited. And in an ideal world, one would not need ambassadors to open up doors and to assist companies. If you may allow me a small comparison, in my country, there would really be it would be considered an extraordinary event if an ambassador is seeing a minister in order to open up the doors for companies to have access to the administration. But in many other countries, this is how it works. And so you must adapt your actions according to the local customs and rules. I think ambassadors are very important in what you can also use as soft powers in order to reinforce the economic diplomacy, in order to give a picture of the country. And in this sense, it's like working with advertisement, because we use social media. We try to show what our countries are good at, what we are doing, what we find important. And And in many countries, who is the better face for this than the ambassador?
Thank you. If
Can I respond to that as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I think obviously I agree with everything my Ambassador Samlin has said. I think that in particular sectors, and telecommunications, and defense are such sectors. There is a strategic importance that's attached to the commercial transactions. And that is also where we come into play as diplomats in those crosswalks between politics and economics. You're right. We're not in the business of picking commercial winners. I think entrepreneurs are much better placed to make those business decisions. But we do have we do have important roles to play in countries like Greece, and especially in the kinds of markets where you know our role as our country's representatives is accorded a certain importance.
Ambassador Lin?
Yes, I guess to me the economics issues mostly cover about 30% of my whole energy. But in the case of Greece, I think that we have a very long tradition of cooperation between businesses. So my role is a little limited, but also whenever I have a chance, I like to meet many Greek businessmen, because listening to what they need and what they are looking for government side is very important. One of the good example was during the pandemic last year. One sailor died in a ship. It's a big merchant ship, but because no other country would not allow the body because they are concerned about the contamination. So only Korea, we accept the body and we checked that there was nothing is clear. So we are able to send the body back to his family. So we coordinated with the Greek ship owner, and they are highly appreciated. But it's not totally for business, but it's a humanitarian point of humanitarian aspect. And Koreans, our company embassy, we like to lead some cooperation, like as a Team Korea. We have a Kotra branch office, that is Korea Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. So embassy, Kotra, and our Korean business community here, we are trying to work together as a Team Korea. So listening to what the business want and what the government can do for them is very important factor. I also agree with the Ambassador of Sweden that nation brand is very important. One company cannot build up its own brand, but if you are trying to build up nation brand by public diplomacy, then it could enhance the general awareness and also bring our partners closer to each other. So that is more important. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from the audience. The colleague says that you have mostly focused on the positive outcome of economic diplomacy, and he would like to ask, what are the obstacles to a successful pursuit of economic diplomacy? And more specifically, as many times political priorities come first, have you faced situations in which your economic initiatives have been frustrated by policies followed by governments? Who would like to answer this?
I'd be happy to kick off.
Okay.
I think yes, there's a need because one civil servant's trade barriers are another civil servant's health and safety requirements, and so very often one will find in governments that regulate and regulators who believe and who have at the top of their mind, and I worked outside of the foreign ministry in regulatory ministries, the health and safety of the public, and sometimes those regulations differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and that creates barriers to trade, quite simply. And so we need diplomats to understand regulatory realities. And I mentioned one very prominent example around vaccines, which I think is pertinent here, to balance that regulation with trade facilitation. The other example from our perspective, which the minister raised, is Eldorado Gold, and there I think we've seen an understanding that in the Greek reality there are antiquities requirements around land use. There are obviously environmental requirements, which Canada also, as a developed G7 country, holds very, very dear, the environmental agenda. And so the promotion of sustainable mining in this sector recognizes that there isn't a trade-off between the environment and the economy, but there are opportunities to advance both together. And so that's but not all government institutions see it from the same perspective, and so that's why I think our job is not going away anytime soon.
Thank you. Next question. Yes, if you feel like.
Can I give an example? I'm sorry. I would like, because Mark pointed out on some very important issues, and example again. We have a Swedish company who sells spare parts to the Greek shipping industry, and these products are being counterfeited in China. And so what we're trying is for the government to check the customs, so that the customs checks more properly the ships coming in from a certain country, in order to avoid these counterfeited goods to enter the country and compete with the original product.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. We have lots of questions, actually, so let me proceed to the next one. How does a government determine which industries or even individual businesses it will support or encourage with diplomatic efforts? Could you answer that, please, one of you?
I'll just be very quick. In terms of industries, I think often it's very natural which countries have which industrial strengths, and which regions within a country have which industrial strengths. So it's not terribly difficult, I think, to do that. I think it's more interesting about individual businesses, because one of the things that we are very, very keen, that we attach a great deal of importance to, is both equity and access to our services, but for those businesses that play by the rules. And so we require all of our clients who seek our services as in the Trade Commissioner service to sign an integrity declaration to indicate that they will play by certain social and economic rules wherever in the world they operate. And so we take that very seriously, and I think that distinguishes who we would support as businesses from who we wouldn't.
Thank you. Next question concerns cultural diplomacy, and
I think my colleague had an intervention.
I'm sorry, I don't have a screen, so please go ahead.
Yes, because I agree with the international standard that government role, I think should be play some balanced role, because all the companies, business should compete in the global market. If the government continue to provide a subsidy or to protect a certain industry, then they can grow up, but only at certain level. But if they can compete in the global market, they should have enough capacity. So we have some saying that at arm's length support, we can support but never interfere, so that the business or even cultural industry can create their own innovation and then grow, enhance their capacity in the global market to compete. So that is more important. Yes.
Okay. In the meantime, I can see you. For a couple of minutes, I didn't have access to the screen. The next question is about cultural diplomacy and its possible role to economic diplomacy. Do you think they go hand in hand or not? Who would like to answer this?
I can just say I definitely they complement each other. And for instance, we work a lot now on Astrid Lindgren and Pippi Longstrump, the Pippi Longstocking. She's celebrating 75 years, and reach out to children. I think the most important part in cultural work is if we manage to have a dialogue with the children, because this is the next generation. And if they somehow create a positive link to Sweden while reading about these characters in Astrid Lindgren, I mean, that's a fantastic thing.
Yes.
Thank you. Ambassador Lim?
Yes, cultural diplomacy is closely linked with creative diplomacy and also nation brand. If I give you one example, is BTS, the Korean boy group, and their economic benefit on Korean economy is about $5 billion a year, $5 billion. So it's an amazing figure. It means that if we build one big LNG ship, it costs about $200 million. So it means the 7-boy group, they are making 25 big LNG ships a year. So economic benefit is huge, and it has a very trickle-down effect on many of the industry, like tourism and not only music, and also it's spread all over to like hotel accommodation and convention. So I think cultural diplomacy is also can generate creative industry. And I think Greece has a great talent for this new industry.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, and that's just one example of a music group. If you look at all of the performing arts, film, television, literature, electronic games, the revenue attached to these cultural undertakings is enormous, and benefits all of our economies. It's also a sector that's experiencing a particular challenge right now with COVID. And the irony is that many of us in our confinement are actually consuming culture more than ever. So we have to find ways to promote these industries and their economic recovery, because they are fundamental to all of our to our societies, but also to our economies.
The next question relates to economic diplomacy and the global fight against the pandemic. The question is, are there any concrete steps to be taken for improving the global vaccine supply chain, as well as the timely access of vaccines everywhere in the world, notably in developing and poor countries?
I can just say, as a member of the European Union, what is very important to recall is that the EU's procurement of vaccines, the EU has procured a huge amount of, or wants to procure a huge amount of vaccines, and it's way and above the amount of citizens. So the idea from the European Union is also to make the additional vaccines available for third countries who are less fortunate to be able to pay for this vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
There is another question very close to the former one. What kind of advice would you give to businesses in Greece suffering from the pandemic and the subsequent ongoing economic crisis? Perhaps you can combine your answer to both questions.
Well, let me say, for instance, that there is, I think, at this stage in the pandemic, a real awareness of the humanitarian imperative to ensure global vaccine distribution. And I alluded to some of the more immediate measures that kind of happen from day to day. But I think there's a real awareness in all of our governments that nobody is protected until everybody is protected, and I think we're trying to have that kind of guide our decision making. In terms of Greece's experience of the pandemic, I want to say how lucky I feel to have been here in this country when we saw the first wave happen, and the solidarity of Greek citizens to respect the measures that the government announced was truly remarkable. I think there is a real resilience in Greek society that's been established over many years of economic adversity, which I think played out to some degree, because I think Greeks really understand through what they've been through sacrifice and giving up personal freedoms and prosperity for the public good, and the whole world is learning that now. So I think Greece has been out ahead on that one.
Ambassador Lim.
Yeah, I think in Oriental saying, crisis means risk and opportunity. Means if you overcome the risk, then you can have a new opportunity. I think it goes applied to Greek companies, because so far Greek government has been very successful in containing COVID-19. And I think that because during the pandemic era, Greek government has launched digital economy, and many business, they had a more online contact with customers. And also our embassy, we, along with our Korean trade agency, we are promoting online business-to-business consultation. So during this year, we'll hold a series of online meetings on ship equipment, medicals, pharmaceutical areas, and food even. So if you overcome this period, I think we can have a new strength, new engine for growth.
The next question refers to what Ambassador Samelin said about China, and asks, how do you view China as far as trade is related? Does the trend of counterfeit items concern you, your countries, and if you are considering alternative countries for manufacturing, given the aforementioned issue?
If I may, I think that's a very interesting question and a very topical question. Our conclusion from what happened in the beginning of the pandemic, when we had disturbance in the value chains, because production couldn't keep up and the containers couldn't pass, so we ended up having European businesses not finalizing their manufacturing because the parts were missing. The strong conviction of my country, and this also relates to the internal discussion within the European Union on strategic autonomy, is that strategic autonomy does not imply that we should be protectionist. And of course, the EU should do as much as it can to strengthen its economic competitiveness in the world. But that's not what you achieve by closing off. So we must work for open trade. And as regards, for instance, now counterfeited goods, Intellectual property rights are handled internationally, and they are being discussed in an international organization, and one works on methods to stop this practice. And of course, having an agreement, a bilateral agreement with China, is important, because you need a forum where you can address these issues, and this is nothing new. All the countries in the world, I think, suffer from counterfeited goods. So it's international cooperation, and we must be able to address this within our countries, to check all the incoming goods, but we must also have a very profound discussion with the third country with whom we trade.
Anyone else wanting to? Oh, both. Please.
Yeah, no, yeah, Mark, you can go first. Yes.
I'll be quick. No, I mean, China obviously is an incredibly important economic actor on the global stage, and a trading partner for my country. That said, there are concerns. Counterfeit goods is one thing. Forced labor is something else, and that's an issue where we have a serious concern, on which we've just announced a series of new measures to ensure that our supply chains from China are as protected as they possibly can be against forced labor practices. So it's a complex relationship. I mean, dialogue is important, and continuing dialogue and open channels. But I think it's another example where economic and political issues intermingle very closely.
Ambassador Lim?
Yeah, there is a very good saying that don't put your all eggs in one basket. As Mark said, that one small incident can generate spillover effect all over. There was also another painful experience that during the pandemic era, one small spare part was cut off from the supply, and all the Korean automobile companies had to suspend their operation for several days. So, and since then, Korean companies and Korean government, we are thinking that the ASEAN countries is one of the new frontiers. So, as I said, ASEAN has become our second partner, biggest partner for trade and investment. So, to have a balance, and also in terms of global supply chain, to have more partners, I think is safe and more efficient.
Thank you. Our next question looks to the future and asks to what extent your work is complicated or simplified by two recent developments, Brexit and the inauguration of the new American president. Are there certain problem points or aspects of relief which stands out? Who would like to go first?
Shall I volunteer as the EU member
please.
here in this group? Brexit is extremely unfortunate. It's loss on both sides. And we are extremely unhappy by this development. I can tell you that we would have liked to have open trade, close relationship, preferably the UK staying in the single market. Nothing of what has happened lately since the Brexit happened, nothing of the last week's problems would have happened if UK would have remained in the single market. And we have very close trade relations, particularly in the services sector with the UK, financial services also. Having said this, I would also like to say that what has happened now has served as a lesson for the rest of the EU membership, I think. And we have learned during the process of Brexit to value the European Union and to value the cooperation that we have. And I'm sorry to say, but business has continued in Brussels. And Brexit has not been the major issue on the agenda for over a year. It may appear so if you read Anglo-Saxon media, but the EU continues moving, and there are new challenges that we have to deal with. So we have learned how to live in a Brexit EU, and I think for the EU we will strive to have the best cooperation with the UK as we can, and be constructive to find solutions on problems occurring over time.
Would you? Yes, Ambassador
Yes,
Allen. Lim.
Yeah, my president had a telephone conversation with President Biden this morning, and they reconfirmed that to enhance very strong alliance between US and Korea, and also to engage in the peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula and Asia Pacific issue. And also Korea was invited by the G7 host from the United Kingdom. So my president will attend the G7 in June. Also, so I think it's a new, there'll be more work to do with the new administration from the United States, tackling the regional and the global affairs together. And also regarding Brexit, many of the Korean companies, our hub is located in European Union, like vis-à-vis and many companies. So there is no significant and direct impact because of this Brexit on Korean economy. So we'll keep up our partnership with the European Union along with the United Kingdom together.
Ambassador Allen?
Sure. In terms of the U.S. elections, I mean, no two countries are more closely interlinked in terms of their economies and their geography. I mean, and so Canada invariably works well with democratic governments and with Republican governments, because we have so many different dialogues on the range of issues that run across that border. Between transportation regulators and health regulators, and the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement. It was originally the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement when it was first negotiated in the 1980s, and so our free trading relationship with the Americans runs deep.
We are running out of time. There are certain questions addressed to either Ambassador Samelin or Ambassador Lim. But since we have 4 minutes to go, let me proceed to a question which is undiplomatic, and ask if you would like to address it. Do you find working with the Greek government more challenging or less, in contrast to other governments you might have worked with?
That's easy. I find it less challenging. What I appreciate about the Greek character is the candor and honesty and the ability just to get to the bottom of the issue very, very quickly. It's something that I value a great deal. And again, I feel very lucky to be representing my country in this one.
Ambassador Lim?
Yeah, based on my personal experience here in Greece already 2.5 years, and I really enjoyed, as Mark said, the frank and the relationship with the Greek government. That is what friends are for, because I don't have to think it over, just exchange very frank opinions, and we can find a good solution. So I really enjoyed working with the Greek government.
Ambassador Samelin?
Είναι καταπληκτική. It's really very good. Your government is very accessible and interested and competent. And I think the handling of the pandemic has been extraordinary. And what makes this country just the favorite country to which I've been coming since I was 10 years old as a tourist is the warmth of the Greek people.
Thank you very much. The questions that I mentioned one question was about Sweden planning to introduce an electronic currency sometime in 2023. And the other two questions related to cultural diplomacy of Korea. If you wanted to respond to that very briefly, we have 2 minutes to go. Ambassador Samelin, will this introduction make your life as an ambassador easier or harder?
No, the life as an ambassador is a privilege. Well, we are here to, of course, work on the happy side of things with events and meeting people, but we are also problem solvers, and we are here to facilitate things. And on the currency, I can only confirm that this is the aim. And I can also add that I've seen that there are also now ongoing discussions to introduce an euro. So, but I can't comment any further. And I would also like to say that any questions by the students, they are very welcome to address them to the mailbox of the embassy, and we will be happy to be in touch with the students.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Lim?
Yeah, cultural diplomacy means like to gain the heart and mind of the people. I think it's most important because with that, we can build up very strong trust. So cultural diplomacy, and because between Greece and Korea, as I said, we have so many in common, even though we are very far away in geographically. And music, dramas, food, fashion, it does not need, it's a kind of international language. You don't have to learn the foreign language. You can just accept it, enjoy it. And even many Koreans, we enjoy Greek products, Greek culture, and Greek warm hospitality. So many of the Korean tourists visiting Greece, after they leave, they became like an ambassador of Greece. And they are trying to promote Greek wines and Greek yogurt and Greek delicious food. So it's a kind of between people-to-people contact and to enjoy the same like culture, so that we can enrich our daily lives as Greece did ancient times for whole humanity.
Ambassador Allen, there was no direct question addressed for a Canadian, but would you like to take the floor for your last contribution to this discussion?
Oh, I'm not too concerned. I had plenty of opportunity through the course. So thank you. That's very kind. I want to thank you, the American College, and to my colleagues. I think this has been a terrific discussion. I think we have a diversity among the three of us, obviously, in terms of the corners of the world that we're representing. But I think we also have a tremendous commonality of interest that we share with Greece, notably, and that's the attachment to openness, to democracy and human rights, because the free market that we've been talking about is, I think, intimately linked with those other values that we all share. So I want to thank you again for this opportunity, and to thank my colleagues for sharing the stage with me today.
Well, we are 2 minutes ahead of scheduled time. Let me apologize to a couple of participants whose questions could not be addressed due to the time constraint. We will contact you through LinkedIn or your emails. We will forward any personal emails to the ambassadors. I want to thank you very, very much for this very interesting and lively discussion and exchange of views. And I look forward to cooperating with you and to organizing other events where you will be able to give us your input, which is so valuable for our students and for us going forward. Thank you very much for your attention. Καληνύχτα, γεια σας. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Καλό βράδυ.
Καλό βράδυ.
Yes.